When you move to the color area, one of the first things I just wanted to point out is that you have this option to look at Lumetri scopes. And what Lumetri scopes is really just showing you all the color profiles, and it's kind of a histogram. And it's letting you know if you're getting too close to the top or too close to the bottom. That's known as clipping, where it's too dark or too bright to be seen clearly and detail is lost when it's clipped. And it's kind of a weird way to look at a video, but when you scrub through it, you can see that it's moving. The positions are changing based on the shot. I'm guessing that this is the eye, the dark part of the eye. And if you look at this scene, you can see almost the waves moving and all the color profiles moving along with those waves. And this shot right here has got a lot of purple. And once again, you see the rippling effects and the brighter tones and the darker tones of blue, as well as the reds and the little bit of greens that are in there. And this one's interesting because you can actually see the trees in reverse, almost upside down like a negative. And as you're looking at that, you can see that. So that's one way to see how the colors kind of spread out. And if you use the wrench tool and you use the vector scope, this one, it's also showing you some limits. So when you start to play around with color, if you can see this view as well as this view, it's going to let you know when you make some edits. So basically when you're changing things on a color profile, if it goes beyond these boundaries or if it's peaking really high and really low, you might want to back off on the edit so that it's a better look. But that's basically what the Lumetri scope is doing. And then I'll say this again, but I'll say it now. Every edit that you make in color is saved in Lumetri scopes. So if you go to Effect Control, it's this, right? Well, I haven't made an edit, so let me make a quick edit. Like exposure. Notice that Lumetri Color is now added as a visual effect, and this can be copied and pasted and done. Basically everything you do in color is saved here. It can be copied and pasted, and that's going to come in handy. So you're looking at color and making those edits with some tools to help you make some careful edits. White film. The easiest, most direct way is to desaturate it, and that takes all the color out of your histogram. And I want a high contrast look because I want darker darks and brighter brights. Tinker with the highlights just a bit. Bring the shadows down a bit. Blacks down a little bit more. Whites up. And so that is a look that I've created using just basic tools. Now, if I want that look for all of these clips, one way to do that is, as I hinted before, is to take Lumetri Color, Command C, and then go to another clip and then just drop that Command V in. So basically instead of redoing all these properties and getting the numbers right, you're basically just saying I've got this, I'm applying the same effect to that. So that's one way. You can copy and paste each of them, and you could do that for all these clips, but what if you have 20 clips? And if you had 20 clips, you probably wouldn't want to take the time to copy and paste Lumetri Color to all of them. Not to mention the fact that if you change something, you're going to have to make those changes in those copies. So if you're in here, you can look at this. It's called New Item. If you click on a new item, you'll have an option to create what's called an adjustment layer. An adjustment layer matches the format of your video. I'm going to do this one and rename it black and white. And the adjustment layer gets placed on the video track just above the clips that you're working on. And in that adjustment layer, it has its own set of properties. If I hit Control V, now you'll notice that this is now applying the same color editing twice. So it changed the look of that. But it also applied it once to every other single scene so that they are matching exactly the color profiles. And for me to fix that, I would just have to take the Lumetri Color and delete it. So now it's only being applied one time for each clip. And that is a really easy way to make changes. Now let's say I look at this Lumetri Color and I go back to my basic corrections and go, you know what, I want to make some tweaks. Now if I change my contrast down or my exposure way up, slightly overexposed, boost some of the highlights, actually drop them. Let's just say this is the look I want now. Way down on the blacks, way up on the whites, and maybe just a little bit of color back. Not much. Because I'm applying that to the adjustment layer, it is also applying it to every single clip underneath it. So it's a really fast way for you to apply your edit to the entire film. Area is the creative area. And the creative area gives you some other tools that you can use, and there's manual ways of doing it. So basically you've got intensity of the footage, which has some subtle adjustments to color. You've got faded film, which gives that faded film look. Almost never use it. Sharpen, too sharp, too blurry. So you can basically you can blur it. There are multiple ways to blur clips, but that's just one way. Vibrance, which is a more subtle boost than saturation. It tends to boost up some of the overlooked colors, but again, don't go too far in anything. And then saturation. And then you've got some options for shadow tint, and then a balance between tints. But basically, I'm going to put those back to as close to center as I can. Or I think actually the best way would be to just delete it and start from scratch. That's all cool, but one of the things I like about this is that it's got some presets. They call them LUTs. I can't remember what the meaning of that was. And some of the presets are just different film stock, different looks that are basically making some of those choices for you and give you a chance to experiment and see if there's one look that you like. And again, once you apply that, you can copy that Lumetri Color to a transparency layer, or you can copy and paste it to each individual clip to get that to transfer without having to do this step for every single shot in your film. They have quite a list of options from these high definition resolution looks to old film stock looks to a gold orange look. And again, when you're changing the final look of your film, you're helping that film stand out. Matrix green, Matrix Mars, I don't know what those are. And it's also something, so these are some black and white noir film looks, some different subtle changes. But again, when you choose a look to your film, you can apply that to the entire thing. There's also some other creative options out there that if you find it, you can download it and install it. And that's what are called LUTs. So the creative options, another tool at your disposal for color editing. Called curves. And curves, put simply, and I am not too good at the RGB one, but it's a simple way for you to affect one color on the spectrum or a group of colors on the spectrum by bending this line. This line represents the baseline footage image, and each one of these give you different options to change. If you move closer to it, I'll zoom in on this, you'll see that it turns into a pen tool, and you can create these points. And notice the points are along this color spectrum, and what that means is if you bend that, you are changing a property from that color spectrum and you're bending the line, and that has an impact on the look of that shot. You can take these points and you can spread them out, getting a broader group of colors modified or narrower group of colors modified. You can also use the dropper tool to select that. So here's there, trying to just double click or click to reset. You use the dropper tool and say, okay, this is the color I want to choose, and then it basically sets those parameters for you. So my sky colors. This particular property, what I'm bending, is hue versus saturation. So I'm changing the saturation levels of these colors to make them a deeper blue. Or if I wanted to desaturate them and take some of the color out, I would go the opposite direction and drain the color out of these blue tones. And again, I use the dropper tool, so it's catching most of the tones in the sky. And if I wanted to use the dropper tool again and choose green, now I've got a green area that if I wanted to say do the opposite and start to saturate the green while desaturating the blue, that's what's happening here in this one. I'm going to reset to 0, double click, seems to be doing the trick. And then you've got one for hue versus hue. This one bends the color. So this is one thing I was doing to try and make this sky look almost alien, and I had Dune as my inspiration. And all I was trying to do was to get the sky to be a much darker, grayish, desert-like planet look. I did try applying this to the other clips. It doesn't work quite as well, but if you do that for some scenes, you can get a lot of mileage out of it. Now there are some problems here, and I just want to point that out. I do notice that it's missing some of the colors that came through the needles. So there is a little bit of an unnatural look. But it does give you that option to create a landscape that's very different by changing some of these tones. Again, if I wanted to go even further, I take the green and I can adjust the hue of those green tones and broaden it out just a bit to catch more of that, more of the green spectrum. Now I've got a really alien looking world with just a few edits because I'm changing the natural hues to create that look. Now again, are there some problems with it? Yeah, I see some green, some blue, but overall I'm trying to show this to you so that you have options to go beyond green screen everything to get a surreal look into a film. The only other one I'm going to cover right now is hue versus luma. And hue versus luma. Luma is your color value, the brightness or the darkness of the value. So right now I'm making a brighter blue or a darker blue. And again, same as before, I could do that with any color choice. Just keep using the dropper to select my colors. I can darken the greens or brighten the greens. And again, each one of these is giving you some really pinpoint control over that. Luma versus sat and sat versus sat, I'll let you discover that on your own. They do make changes, but they're more related to saturation and luma versus these ones, which I think are much more straightforward. So I don't want to spend more time demonstrating that. To work with is the HSL Secondary. And this one took me a while to figure out. You're choosing a color. It's using HSL color properties to manipulate it. But the easiest way to start is to use the dropper tool and choose a color that you want to select, and then those values are chosen for you. It's a little hard to see unless you choose this. And when you choose that, you see the exact color properties that you've chosen. Now, to add, let's say I want more purple tones, I'm going to keep clicking on purple parts with the additive dropper, and obviously if you did the opposite, negative dropper. And what that will do is broaden the values. So now I see more of that purple. I'm going to try to get more purple tones in. And then because I got some greens in, I'm going to try to delete some of those greens. So I'm just really working with these purples. And once you've got those values selected, it gives you the chance to affect a broad range of colors by selection rather than trying to catch it on the curves. In the end result may be very similar. So I'm going to denoise that to kind of fill in some of that. And I don't really want to blur it. I'll leave that as is. And then you've got the color corrections. You can work with general color corrections, push that in any direction that you want it to, and push it more towards a darker, deeper purple. And then the other tools that, again, we've seen before, we're just seeing them in a different context. So basically, that's how you would apply that and use that. And so when I take it out, now I've got that kind of vivid purple. Could I have done the same thing with curves? Probably, but it's a little bit easier for choosing one color out of all the other ones to have that impact on. The one thing I haven't figured out is whether or not I could do this again for a second color value, because once you do, it tends to lose it. So still something to learn, but it's definitely another way that you can get some pretty easy results by choosing those color properties. Looks like I lost everything that I had done. I must have clicked on something and lost it. It's something I almost never use, and whenever I say that, I always find a way to use it, or I see something, but it's the vignetting effect. And so again, it's a Lumetri Color property that you can copy and paste, but what it's doing is kind of closing in the outer edges, and you have a lot of choices about where that vignette is, and it's just kind of framing your scene. You can feather it to kind of smooth it out, or you see the vignette here very clearly without any feathering. And then I'm changing the shape of the vignette. Let's go right about here. And then once you feather it in, that's how your you're subtling the effect, and then you could go bigger or smaller. So yeah, for this particular scene, again, I don't use it very often. I just chose this one to be the vignette. You know, if it's the ending credits of a movie, whatnot, you can use that. So that's the final tool. There's more here, but I think I've given you a good start.